The $1 betrayal, he sold our dream home to his mistress, but he didn't know my price for justice. Nora Vance walked away from Julian, his sputtering questions about the fine print echoing unanswered in the suddenly cavernous space of what was once their shared dream. Her mind, however, wasn't replaying his panicked face. It was a whirlwind of cold, hard calculation, a chilling clarity settling over the initial shock. Julian could wonder. Oh, he'd find out soon enough. The irony of it all wasn't lost on her. The man who belittled her career was about to be undone by it. 2 weeks. It had taken just 2 weeks for my meticulously planned life to implode. Or so it had seemed. Now, sitting in the sterile quiet of my law office, the scent of old paper and new ambition, a familiar comfort, I saw it differently. This wasn't an implosion, it was a demolition, and I was about to pick up the sledgehammer. My specialization in complex asset litigation, a field Julian had always dismissed with a condescending pat on the head. Bless your heart, Nora, all those dusty old books was about to become his worst nightmare. The memory was seared into my brain, my usually unflappable colleague Sarah hovering in my doorway, her face pale. Nora, she'd stammered, holding out a flimsy sheet of paper as if it were radioactive. I I think you need to see this. The property transfer document. Stark, brutal. Willow Creek Manor, transferred to Serafina Dubois. Consideration $1, one single dollar. For 3 years of dreams of arguments over paint swatches and beam placements of whispered promises on the half-built wraparound porch. The floor hadn't just dropped out from under me. It had dissolved into a chasm of betrayal. For 12 years I'd trusted Julian. Implicitly, he'd handled all the financial intricacies of the Willow Creek Manor construction, insisting it's just easier this way, darling, while you're busy building your big career. His tone, I realize now, had always carried that faint, patronizing edge. You focus on your cases, he'd say, as if my work, my passion, was a quaint little hobby. That carefully cultivated trust lay in ruins, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. But shock, I discovered, had a surprisingly short shelf life when fueled by righteous fury. It quickly morphed, coalescing into a cold, methodical anger. A glacial resolve settled in my bones. He mistook my focus for naivety. He mistook my trust for weakness. He forgot who I was. He forgot that before I was Nora Vance, wife of Julian Thorne, I was Eleonora Vance, attorney at law, a woman who knew how to dissect a contract and find the blood in the ink. So I began to dig. Digital copies. Hard copies. Every invoice, every email, every permit related to Willow Creek Manor's conception, construction, and the damning property transfer. My office became a war room, the glow of my monitor, the only light as I sifted through the mountain of legal documents. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a forensic examination of a crime. His crime. Hours bled into one another. Coffee turned cold, then was refilled, then turned cold again. I pored over the lengthy, convoluted deed for Willow Creek Manor. My eyes, trained by years of deciphering impenetrable legalese, scanned for any anomaly, any loophole, any leverage. Anything. And then deep into the second night, as the city outside finally fell into a semblance of quiet, my finger stopped. A subclause. Buried. Tucked away deep within the labyrinthine deed restrictions. A county-specific addendum, almost an afterthought pertaining to custom builds and undervalued transfers. It was obscure. Easily missed. Unless, of course, your entire career was built on not missing such things. A slow, dangerous smile, one I hadn't felt in years, touched my lips. It wasn't a smile of happiness. Oh no, it was the smile of a predator that had just spotted its unsuspecting prey. There you are. I whispered to the glowing screen the words, a soft, satisfied hiss in the stillness of the room. I had found it. Phase 1 of Julian's reckoning was about to begin. He'd signed his name to his own undoing. The full, devastating implications of that tiny, overlooked cluster of words were yet to unfold, but I could already see the path ahead. It was a path paved with his arrogance and my expertise. The city felt different the next morning. Or maybe I was different. The path ahead was fraught with legal battles, certainly, but for the first time since seeing that damning property transfer document, Since Julian's smug pronouncements, I felt a sliver of power return. He thought this was just about a house about his name on the paperwork. He had no idea. The clause itself was a masterpiece of bureaucratic vengeance, a small, densely worded paragraph, often overlooked by amateurs, but a cornerstone of fair market practice in our county. The Fair Value Transfer Clause, as it was dryly named. I spent the next 2 days dissecting it, cross referencing it with county tax codes, ensuring my interpretation was ironclad. It stipulated in no uncertain terms that any property sold for significantly less than its officially assessed market value. A cool $2.8 million in the case of Willow Creek Manor. Within the first 5 years of its initial build would trigger an automatic and thorough review by the county tax authority. Standard enough. But here was the kicker: the clause went on to specify that in such cases of blatant undervaluation, the difference between the sale price, a laughable $1, and the current market value would be subject to an immediate crippling, capital gains and transfer tax, payable, of course, by the seller. Julian. He signed it. He actually signed it without reading. I marveled, a humorless laugh escaping me, the sheer, unadulterated recklessness of it. All those years, he'd overseen the tedious details, as he'd called them, and he'd missed this beautiful ticking time bomb. Or perhaps he'd seen it and, in his supreme arrogance, dismissed it. It didn't matter. His signature was on the deed, his liability. My phone buzzed intermittently. Julian. His texts at first were confused. Nora. What did you mean, fine print, call me? Then they morphed into annoyance. Becca, stop being dramatic. Whatever little loophole you think you found, it's nothing. I ignored them, all my focus, absolute, a laser beam of intent. My silence, I knew, would be far more unsettling to him than any screaming match. Let him stew in his own ignorance. It would make the eventual enlightenment all the more impactful. While the tax trap was priming itself, I uncovered another equally sordid layer of his financial deceit. Delving into our joint accounts, the ones I'd barely glanced at for years, trusting him completely, I found a systematic pattern of transfers. Small amounts at first, then larger, all flowing into a private account solely in Julian's name. Funds he'd used for the construction of Willow Creek Manor, yes, but also funds clearly intended to be sequestered, hidden away for his new life with his 23-year-old paramour. He paid for his grand betrayal with our money, I noted, printing out statement after statement, the evidence mounting into a damning pile. Every penny spent building that house, our supposed dream, could be traced back to marital assets. In our state, that meant I had a claim to half its value regardless of whose name was on the deed. Another nail in his coffin. Another piece of his carefully constructed charade crumbling. A quick check of the County Tax Authority website, and there it was, right on schedule. A discreet notice of review now attached to the Willow Creek Manor property listing, triggered by the recent absurdly low sale price. It was official. Julian would be receiving his first formal notification any day, a polite but firm letter requesting clarification on the property transfer. I could almost picture his face, that smug smirk, finally beginning to waver, confusion clouding his usually arrogant eyes. Oh, this was just the polite inquiry. The real bill, the one that would make his blood run cold, was still to come. The first invoice is in the mail. Julian, I whispered to the empty room, a grim satisfaction settling in. My phone started ringing, then Julian's name flashing insistently on the screen. His voice, when the voicemail kicked in, was no longer annoyed. It was tight, strained. The first tremor of impending doom. I let it ring out, a grim smile playing on my lips. Let him sweat. Let him. This was just the overture. While Julian was likely hyperventilating over the initial tax query from the County Tax Authority, I was already several meticulous steps ahead, orchestrating the next wave of his rapidly approaching financial and personal unraveling. My office, that quiet sanctuary he'd often dismissed, had transformed into my war room, the battle lines drawn with stacks of legal pads and precisely highlighted documents. He thought this was bad. Oh, he hadn't seen anything yet. The impending doom he sensed was merely the shadow of the axe, not the blade itself. The official demand from the County Tax Authority finally landed, hitting Julian with the force of a runaway freight train, $980 the dollars. Due immediately. The number, stark and uncompromising on official letterhead, must have stolen the air from his lungs. Predictably, he appeared outside my apartment building that evening, the small, sensible place I'd insisted on keeping, much to his past annoyance. It's so pedestrian Nora. We have Willow Creek Manor. His earlier smugness was a distant memory completely replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. His tailored suit looked rumpled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. Good. Nora, you did this, he bellowed, his voice cracking as I approached the entrance key in hand. He was pacing like a caged animal, a stark contrast to the coolly confident man who had packed his bags just weeks before. This tax bill? It's insane. You have to fix it. You have to tell them it was a mistake. I paused, my expression carefully neutral. I did nothing but trust you, Julian. I stated, my voice calm, cutting through his hysteria. You signed the deed. You assured me it was all perfectly legal. Remember, tedious details, I believe you called them. Before he could launch into another tirade, a neatly dressed process server stepped forward from the shadows of the lobby. Julian Thorne. The man's voice was professionally bland. Julian, momentarily distracted, nodded dumbly. The server handed him a thick sheaf of documents. You've been served. He looked down at the papers, his face paling further. Divorce petition. A claim for the full and equitable division of all marital assets, with a very specific, very detailed addendum emphasizing that Willow Creek Manor, his precious bargaining chip, was built almost entirely with joint funds, every invoice meticulously documented. And the cherry on top, a petition for an emergency injunction to freeze all his known accounts, citing the clear evidence of fraudulent transfers and asset siphoning. He was stunned into a rare, sputtering silence. For a moment, he just stared at the papers, then at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. The hunter was now the hunted. The next day, Mr. Alistair Finch, the forensic accountant I'd hired, a man whose spectacles seemed to magnify not just text, but also the financial sins of men like Julian, sat in my office. He was the epitome of discreet professionalism, his report bound in unassuming gray. He's been systematically diverting assets for over a year. Mrs. Vance Finch stated, his tone dry as he laid out a series of spreadsheets and bank statements across my desk. Over $3.2 million, not including the current valuation of the house. Appallingly clumsy work, I must say, for someone who considers himself a businessman. He used your joint account as a pass-through for many transactions, presumably thinking it would muddy the waters. Instead, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Finch's lips. It gives us a perfect, irrefutable record. It's all here. Irrefutable proof. The sheer scale of his planned financial gutting was staggering, yet Finch's calm, precise delivery of the damning information somehow anchored me. Just as I was absorbing the full weight of Julian's long-term financial betrayal, my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Miss Vance, Nora Vance. The voice on the other end was young, hesitant, and trembling. It's Serafina? Serafina Dubois. My heart gave a little flutter. So the ripples were spreading. I need to talk to you about the house. About the taxes. Julian never said anything about property taxes, and now he says his accounts are frozen. Her voice cracked, a sob catching in her throat. I can't afford these property taxes. They're enormous. What am I going to do? I leaned back in my chair, considering the young woman on the other end of the line. Barely older than my youngest cousin, a pawn, albeit a willing one in Julian's greedy, destructive game. Another life Julian had casually upended in his quest for what more, something new. It hardly mattered now. Serafina, caught between Julian's imploding world and the looming threat of tax foreclosure on a property she owned but couldn't afford, had little choice but to listen to me, the woman her lover had so grievously wronged. The net was tightening, not just around Julian, but around anyone foolish enough to be caught in his orbit. My advice to her had been blunt, devoid of sympathy, but packed with cold, hard logic. Sell it. I'd told Serafina Dubois over the phone, her panicked sobs a tinny counterpoint to the calm efficiency of my office. Sell Willow Creek Manor for its true market value. It's your only way to cover the property taxes due on the transfer and walk away with anything other than crippling debt and a legal mess. There was a long pause on her end, filled with sniffles and the audible wrestling of fear. fear of Julian's reaction, no doubt, versus the more immediate fear of financial ruin. But Julian will be furious, she finally whispered. He used you, Serafina. I stated, my voice flat, betraying none of the contempt I felt. He put you in an impossible position without a second thought for the consequences you would face. His anger is not your concern now. Your financial survival is. That apparently resonated more than any appeal to morality. Within days, Willow Creek Manor was listed. Serafina, to her credit, or perhaps out of sheer desperation, acted quickly. The house, a testament to architectural beauty, if not marital fidelity, sold surprisingly fast to a young family with 3 children, fetching a respectable $2.9 million, enough for Serafina to settle the hefty property tax bill that had landed in her lap due to the $1 sale, and then some. She paid her dues, her immediate crisis averted. And then she simply vanished. Word on the legal grapevine, a surprisingly efficient conduit for gossip, was that she'd moved back to her quiet hometown in Havenwood State, far from the glittering wreckage of Julian's life. Smart girl. She cut her losses. Julian, when he learned of the house sale, his house, as he still deludedly thought of it, was apoplectic. He apparently bombarded Serafina with furious calls and texts accusing her of betrayal, of siding with me, as if loyalty was something he understood or deserved. The irony was rich. Meanwhile, Julian's high-powered and no doubt astronomically expensive attorney was earning his keep, or trying to. He argued passionately in court that the deed restriction, the infamous fair value transfer clause, was unconscionable, a sneaky trap. The judge, a stern woman with little patience for fools, didn't buy it for a second. The clause, she ruled, was standard practice in the county for custom builds of that magnitude, clearly worded, and Julian Thorne, a supposedly savvy businessman with years of experience, had signed the deed willingly with ample opportunity to review its contents. His signature was his bond, and his bond was now his undoing. There was no escape. The $980,000 transfer tax bill therefore stood. It devastated what remained of his liquid assets that hadn't already been frozen by my injunction. The man who had envisioned a golden future with his young mistress and millions in sequestered funds was now facing a financial abyss, and the divorce proceedings, armed with Mr. Alistair Finch's meticulous, irrefutable report on Julian's systematic financial manipulations, the siphoned funds, the hidden accounts, the clear timeline of his fraudulent transfer of marital assets. It was less a negotiation and more a systematic dismantling of his remaining defenses. His attempts to portray himself as the wronged party, the victim of a vindictive wife, crumbled under the sheer weight of documented evidence. His business reputation, once sterling in our city's tight-knit financial community, was in tatters. Whispers followed him. Deals dried up. The Golden Boy was tarnished, revealed as a common cheat. One evening, as I was in my own apartment, the one I'd steadfastly refused to sell, reviewing the latest settlement proposals from his beleaguered lawyer, my phone buzzed. A text from Julian. No fury this time, no bluster. Just the quiet desperation of a defeated man. You've destroyed everything I built. Everything. I looked at the words on the screen, a strange calm washing over me. I thought about responding, about pointing out the glaring inaccuracy. We built it, Julian, and you were the one who chose to burn it all down with your lies and your greed. Instead, I set my phone aside. He wasn't worth the energy. He had made his choices. Now he was living with the consequences. The empire of lies he had so carefully constructed had in the end crumbled to dust. He was a broken man, his grand schemes unraveled, his future bleak. And me? For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was starting to see a flicker of light at the end of a very long, very dark tunnel. He had underestimated me, not just as a lawyer, but as a woman who would not under any circumstances be broken. The calls from Julian had long since stopped. 6 months later, the dust, both literal and metaphorical, had settled. The city skyline outside my new office window, the one with Nora Vance's partner etched discreetly on the frosted glass, seemed to promise a different kind of dream, one built on my own terms. The view was spectacular, a panorama of glittering towers and endless sky, but it wasn't the cityscape I cherished most these days. It was the quiet, steady hum of peace within me. A peace I had fought for, a peace I had earned. The divorce was finalized. A fair and equitable division of assets as the law dictated. Ironically, the proceedings had been made simpler, almost embarrassingly so for Julian, by his own clumsy attempts to hide those marital assets. Mr. Alastair Finch's meticulous report had laid bare every shady transfer, every poorly concealed account, leaving Julian's high-priced legal team with very little room to maneuver. There was no arguing with the stark clarity of spreadsheets and bank statements. Justice, it turned out, had an excellent accountant. Willow Creek Manor, the monument to our once shared future, and later to Julian's spectacular deceit, now housed a happy, boisterous family with 3 young children. I'd seen them once from a distance, their laughter echoing across the manicured lawns. There was a pang, yes, a faint ghost of what might have been, but it was fleeting quickly, overshadowed by a surprising sense of relief. The house was just a house. Its loss no longer defined me. The betrayal, the raw, visceral wound of it, still stung occasionally, a faint scar that twinged when the weather changed, but it was a part of my past, not the entirety of my present. My phone buzzed one afternoon. A text from my sister Claire. Saw Julian at some dive bar downtown. Looked like hell. Seriously. You okay? A small smile touched my lips. I thought of the Julian I had known, the confident, charming man who had swept me off my feet, and the broken, desperate creature he had become, undone by his own greed and arrogance. Better than okay, I typed back the words, feeling truer than anything I'd said in years. I'm free. And I was. Free from the weight of his lies, free from the suffocating charade of our marriage, free from the need to prove anything to anyone, least of all to him. He had made his ultimate mistake, not in the affair, not even in the audacious $1 sale, but in forgetting who I truly was, beneath the accommodating, trusting wife persona he had so conveniently constructed. He'd forgotten the Eleanor Vance who understood property law better than he ever would, the woman who knew how to dissect a contract, follow a money trail, and when pushed, how to fight back with every legal weapon in her arsenal. He had tried to take everything from me to leave me with nothing. But in the end, he'd only succeeded in showing me my own strength, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I looked out at the city again, at the endless possibilities stretching before me. The dream house was gone, yes. The life I had planned with Julian Thorne was over, but I was still standing, stronger, wiser. Forged in the fire of his betrayal, I had emerged not unscathed, but certainly unbroken. And that, I realized with a profound sense of clarity, was a foundation no one could ever take from me. My future was mine to build, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt an exhilarating sense of anticipation for whatever came next.